Thank you very much, Caleb, for this interview. Today we will talk about Delta Green. We have some question about the game. The first one is Delta Green combines elements of the mythos of Cthulhu with government conspiracies. What were the main sources behind this kind of narrative blend?
Yeah, so I wasn't there at the original creation of the game, but Dennis Detweiler, Shane Ivey, John Scott Tynes, they all created Delta Green originally as an expansion to the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, and it had a mechanical motivation initially. In that game, it was difficult to explain how all these groups of disparate people with all these various, like a hobo and a heiress and a musician, how they all came together to go like solve cult crimes. And the inspiration to how to fix that gaming problem in terms of explaining your story was in Lovecraft itself in the 1928 raid on Innsmouth by the FBI and what was like the equivalent of the FBI at the time and the naval office of the government. And so by blending in United States governmental conspiracy theory and interweaving it with the cosmic horror of the unnatural and things of that nature, it sort of gave an instant framework for getting more and more people into these horrific stories, because that was your job, because that's what you had to do, because that was what you were ordered to do. And you were trying to hold back this sort of thing. And as that evolved over the years, it became its own role-playing game. It's definitely, I think, taken on its own tone and said things that certainly were not being said during Lovecraft's time. I think it's pulled from other authors and done good things in cosmic horror and weird fiction in general. But that was the impetus of that. And then I think 6 months after the game got published in the Unspeakable Oath, the X-Files came out. And that just made it blow up even harder because it was really part of the 90s conspiratorial UFO zeitgeist. Yeah.
Thank you. The game has a deeply unsettling and paranoid atmosphere. How did you balance the horror element with the need to create a smooth and accessible game system?
Well, I think the Delta Green RPG simplifies as much as possible because it wants you to have characters that have a deep inner life with bonds and people and their families, and characters that you want to see succeed and want to survive and thrive. But it is a game system about destroying that. It is a game system about utterly taking all of that and hollowing it out and scooping it away with exposure to things that man was not meant to see. And as a result for that, the rules have to be very quick to get you another one to throw through that sort of sadistic process. So it is a horror game that tries to get out of the way, really focus on the procedure of discovering the truth, and then the damage of knowing the truth in a variety of ways. So I think that's what the system does best.
Thank you very much. How important was for you, for company, that the game aesthetics reflect its dark and complex themes?
Well, I was hired on late to Delta Green, and the only reason I got the job is because I passed a test of the darkness of themes and the maintenance of the game's aesthetic and worldview. A test that most people do not pass, according to the creators of the IP. They are very protective of Delta Green. Is not a power fantasy. It is not about how cool you are because you got all the government's big guns and planes and you're going to go get that tentacle monster. It is far bleaker, far more realistic in its depiction of what happens when humans fight inhuman problems. And it is not going to waver from that, sort of grim march into the true implications of cosmic horror. So I would say that the Delta Green brand's commitment to maintaining that tone is near total, because I'm like the first full-time person they've hired in like 15 years since they developed the brand. So They're really concerned about maintaining that core idea, and I think it's to their benefit. Yeah.
How did the game works, and how did do you suggest players have to work to convey the tension and the typical urgency of this kind of genre?
Well, it depends on what kind of game you're going for. Delta Green pulls together all these different professions in a sort of meta organization of the United States government, but there's different versions of it in other countries that have entirely different rationales and ideologies. And even within the US government, there's like, if you're doing a game about the CDC dealing with evils from outer space, it's going to be different than if you're doing a game about Navy SEALs or videographers for a television show, or it's going to have a very different approach. What I would say is that you should keep the unnatural rare. You should keep it, very lightly touching the story. Humans are the greatest danger in any horror movie, even if there is something inhuman in it, and maintain that sort of genre truism. You should pursue verisimilitude, so the feeling of being real. The cool thing about Delta Green is that you don't have to learn what it's like to live as an elf and then want to learn what it's like to be an elf and see something scary.
Okay.
You're already a person in the world of Delta Green. You just have to take the one step for how would I react, or how would my character react seeing this thing that's impossible. And so as long as you keep the supernatural and unnatural elements rare, and you keep them dangerous, you keep the stakes very high, you keep the promise of safety non-existent, you will make a pretty good horror game. Yeah.
Thank you. The last question is a question I love to do and to ask, because I think it's a question that connects players and masters with the team behind the game. What tips would you give to game master and or players to get the most out of Delta Green gaming experience?
I would say that is something that's true of any gaming experience, and you should communicate about what you're all there for before you start. There are safety reasons for that, which I won't belabor, but you obviously don't want to harm anyone at the table. But more importantly, if one person wants like a military simulation, alien style bug hunt, and the other person wants like a slow burn noir supernatural mystery, and the third person's there just because you brought snacks, it's not going to be as good as a game as if you all talk first and we all decide, well, I kind of like this movie and I want it to be like this book and I want to explore this theme, and you sort of get on the same page about what sort of game we're going to get out of Delta Green before you start. Because the rules are there. They're very good as written, as making a very dark and high stakes horror story with a sort of techno thriller background. That's what the rules do by themselves. But you still have so much freedom in how to execute that at your table. And when I see it not work, it's normally because everybody skipped that conversation where we decided to write a game about a certain thing. And we just kind of started with 14 different interpretations of what these rules were going to be. So I know when I record things on Dead channels, I always talk to people on Discord or on Voice first, like, what kind of game of Delta Green are we running? Is it going to be a campaign? Is it going to be a one-shot? Are we going to focus on the characters' interior lives? Is it going to be like an episode of Law and Order, but there's tentacles in it? Like, what are we shooting for? And then that usually helps us stay on track. And once you have that tone established, make it sacred. Like, if you're going to be serious about it, if it's not going to be a jokey beer and popcorn game, and you talked about that first, commit. Like, make it intense. If it's going to be sort of darkly humorous, commit. Like, write bits for it. Like, you just gotta make a thesis statement first, and then write towards it. Yeah.